Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being had.
There are a number of people in this room that have done that repeatedly over the years. I got had by them. I assume that ostensibly the reason I'm here is because I was a founding member of the arts group. So it appears that I'm one of the old guard now. I'm here to discuss how it was back in the old days, which is unusual for me because the entire time I spent in the retail industry, I was always the young guy from Seattle that was trying to figure out what everybody else who had been here for decades knew and understood. It is literally an honor to be here because I have effectively, at least for the moment, left the retail industry. And while it'll always be in my heart, I don't know at this moment whether or not I'll jump back in the roles I did before. So realistically, I wanted to manage expectations about what it is that I'm going to share with you today. It's fair from my perspective that it's fluff, that I'm fluff. I'm delighted if somehow that resulted in some additional attendees. But my role here is actually really just to keep things moving so that we can see the three primary presentations. We're going to hear about blockchain, everything location, and robotics applications in retail. And I wanted to simply throw some context in advance for possibly different ways you might think about this. And along the way, maybe we'll pull the room a little bit to see what your perspectives are on things so that as we get into the individual presentations and hopefully a lively panel presentation following, that we'll have some sense of where the group sits on these issues. So, and I will also have to say, I really should have canceled my presence today, but because everybody came from so far, I have come, and I'll tell you right now, the presentation is not finished. But I think we'll get through it just fine. So the primary point up on the screen is disruptive technologies create disruption. I'm going to push on that particular question for a little bit. We're just going to show a couple of interesting examples, have a little chat about it. If that's fun, we can keep it up a little bit, but the whole goal of this is to just lay a perspective so that we can consider that with the three technologies we'll see in a moment. So there's my proposition. I don't believe it. Put it up there so you can get yourself sucked into it in your head. I think that's what I was going to say. So right out of the gates, I'd like to just get that vote. Karen, can you just jot down whether you feel like it went one way or another? Can somebody? Because I think you'll be curious later. I'd like to know, do people believe that disruptive technologies create disruption? If you believe that, would you raise your hand? We got one. Okay, well, that's at least we get to sustain this. How many people believe that is not true? Okay, generally speaking. Well, this isn't possibly going to be as interesting as I thought then.
Okay, I don't need to write anything down?
No, that's pretty clear. I believe that there's an enormous clog that happens when people try to move great ideas into commercial spaces. And it is also my belief that it's very, very hard for wonderful, great, powerful ideas to ever see the light of day because of all that happens to squeeze it through that hole of monetization, commercialization, marketplace application, whatever you want to say. So there is a great example of this wasn't finished. And all I can say is I got driven down here while dealing with lawyers constantly the entire time, so I apologize for my formatting. So I just wanted to talk just for a moment about disruption in transportation. Anybody want to just posit what's the great disruption recently in transportation? Uber definitely comes to mind, ride share. These are the kinds of things I'm talking about, and the question of whether or not they really merit any unique basis worth chasing, or whether it's actually just everybody creating noise that they're all circulating in within themselves. So the electric scooters and micromobility is an enormous thing. I don't know if people have watched the numbers behind this, but it's fairly large. So I'd like to know how many people think Uber is the disruption in the space versus things like mobility. So it's Uber, not much. Mobility, more. Okay, well actually my point's not going to be very interesting. We'll push through these because this group is primed and I'm actually pleased by it because it is not the typical response I get from these groups. We get lost so much inside what we're trying to create that we forget how to analyze the outside world. It is also my belief that if you have a perfect environment with no need for commercialization or monetization, more an academic, research-based environment, that you could keep the purity of your dream alive longer. The moment you branch and try to serve a specific need, you're taking energy out of the idea itself in order to create an implementation. So how do you deal with that? Brick and mortar, what's going on? Kroger and Walgreens strikes me as extremely interesting right now, but I'm curious, do we think is this immersive retail, experiential retail, which are all these fantastic words people keep talking about disruption in retail formats? Personally, I don't see it. That to me is more so. How many people think immersive and all that lovely fancy talk is more important than the fact that we're trying to address the fact that people eat, and what they want to eat is in motion based on underlying cultural trends. Food or food system disruption, to me, is it crowd cow or the basic food industry trends? I'm sure there are a few people here that know this, but I'll share with everybody. My first job was typography.
Must be proud.
Oh man, this is really hard for me to do, I have to say. I have beaten up so many graphic artists on my slides over the years. I'm going to skip through them rather than the votes, but I do want to touch on some interesting examples. These aren't going to map back to tech. I just want to talk about them as abstract examples and where they illuminate some interesting themes. There is an enormous, I can think of a number of ways to read that. There is an enormous market emerging. People taking care of themselves, trying to have a more interesting life, more rewarding, relaxing, luxurious, all of the things that people are now saying are important to them more than other things were to the previous generation. We are seeing these efforts begin to unveil technologies that might be interesting to serve this, store formats, all of those things are coming out of it. And yet I don't see, today, I see virtually no technology in this space. I'm just talking about a diffuser. You know, if it's got a UL sticker on the cord, that does not qualify as technology. And there are more of these coming. There's an entire shift to all plant eaters. So what is unique in that space? Embark. I love this. Effectively, this is the DNA summaries of your pets. And I'm going to stop having you guess. The underlying issue here in society is the group of individuals who are responsible for these animals absolutely believe they're a member of the family. So that was the connection, right? It was that need that came from underneath. Super easy for a DNA test outfit to say, well, you can do that on dogs. And that's what I'm talking about, is when we surface these reasons this magnificent thing I did makes sense. I frequently hear a tremendous amount of points that all they're doing is talking about how it does what it does better than other things that do it. I guess you can go after an existing marketplace and hope to simply be E2 better, but it's my belief that the opportunities come from identifying the underlying trends, right, that will expose an opportunity for disruption. It is talked about constantly, in my opinion, about as though it's a force, and you can do things to stimulate that force. I happen to disagree. So it really was just an opportunity to get this started and get us thinking in this fashion. And the hope that this kind of dialogue can come back, either in questions of the speakers that will begin in a moment, or as part of a panel discussion at the end. So we have 3 great presentations coming. I want to essentially conclude with the point that to me, ultimately, I'm trying to make with all those things. How do multiple people look at the same thing and define entirely different views of what those opportunities are? And I happen to believe that there are certain things that we know about that with a tremendously small amount of energy will result in an amazing amount of action. And that there are behaviors of these things that are designed in this way that are quite unique. With the most important thing from my perspective being the understanding then that shit wobbles when it spins. It is the exact opposite of what happens when you have a design that is organic from the bottom up. If you find yourself compromising the design to chase the individual applications that are in the source, they're implications of what you're working on, I believe you'll end up with something that does not spin like the gyroscope does.